Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Williamsburg City Council work session of December 9th. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers? Here. Ms. Ramsey? Here. Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernscher?
Here.
Okay, takes us to item 3. Anything for council preview, Mr. Trivett?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the City Council meeting, we've got a couple of things. Under matters of special privilege, we'll be saying a thank you to the Commissioner of Revenue who's leaving office, as well as Councilman Rogers. And then under public hearings, we have 2 to consider allowing temporary buildings for offices at the water facility to allow that construction to continue. Then we have an appeal, actually 2 appeals of ARB cases related to contributing status of 5 Grove Avenue and their ability to put in non-wood windows. And then the last public hearing is to allow the CDR to put in a retention facility on our property adjacent to their new building. We won't do a monthly operating report so that we can get to stay the city a little bit faster. And then under new business, we have 2 items related to boards and commission appointments. We have a application for Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund for Williamsburg Downtown. There is a couple of budget amendments, one dealing with new positions, and then we have approval of the legislative agenda and approval of what we hope after today's presentation will be the African American Heritage Trail narrative.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Seeing none. All right, leads us now to public comment. If anybody would like to come address council, please step forward and say hello. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion and go on to background presentations and discussions. And first and only is a presentation of the proposed African American Heritage Trail narrative by the advisor committee. Ms. DeWitt, I believe you're going to start this off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm delighted today. I will just set the stage, and the advisory committee and our consultant who worked with them and the public will share the details of the narrative. So to set the stage, I did want to introduce the advisory committee members, many of whom are here today, at least 4 of them, maybe 5. Appreciate that. So you can see their names here. And then I wanted to go through the timeline of how we got to where we are today. So in 2020, City Council included in its GIO plan the idea of an African American Heritage Trail. We were looking for funding for it, and that funding was achieved through a congressional earmark from the federal government in January 2023 to get started. So that funds the first phase, which is the actual trailhead construction, a public restroom, and the first trail segment, which will be from Lafayette Street up to Scotland Street on city and housing authority property. So the trail, to give you the big picture, is a little more than 2 miles, and it moves through downtown Williamsburg, mostly along existing sidewalks. There will be some new sidewalks and new trail constructed in certain phases. There will be breadcrumbs that will lead probably with brick or other markers so that people on the trail can see how to move forward, and there will be markers identifying stories of the trail. In addition, the trailhead has space for a community memorial to be situated there as a place of contemplation for people to gather and spend time as they start or in the trail. So what we did, you'll see, we started with community input, and then an advisory committee was quickly formed, and they identified through a public procurement process an historian and storyteller, which is JMI and Share More Stories, to work with them in the community on what is the narrative of the trail. So today you'll hear about this overarching narrative of the trail. The next steps for the advisory committee are to identify the actual stops on the trail and the language that will be done not only on signage but in an audio format, digital format as well. So I want to introduce Janice Canaday, one of the members of the advisory committee, to kick us off. Talk about the advisory committee's experience, and then she will introduce Mr. Warren to talk about the details of how the narrative was developed.
Welcome, Ms. Canaday.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I don't have to introduce myself. Good. First, I want to say it's a pleasure to be standing before you as a member of the advisory committee. And I'm only speaking for myself, though I stand here representing the others, not just as the African American Community Engagement Manager for Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, not just as Vice Chair of the Directors Board at First Baptist Church, not just as a participant in Let Freedom Ring Foundation. I'm going to get it all in there. And a person who's lived in Williamsburg all our life, but I want you to know that it is probably one of the greatest honors to stand here and know that the city and all those who are in a position to make change want to really make a change and establish a difference here in the community, that they really want to highlight people who have been erased, whose accomplishments have not been talked about, have been overlooked, and finally want to bring them to the forefront. And even though you might not see great numbers here, the word has gotten out, people are hearing, they're listening. Some are questionable, which is understandable. Some are all for it, and some don't know what to think. So you've got 3 chances to get it right. So bring those on board who aren't there, and to convince others who want to be but aren't quite sure. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's a great honor. I hope that this is just the beginning of many things to come. We were all at the parade last night. A lot of folks were there, and it was wonderful to see how the community can come together at different occasions, and I hope that that's something that we continue to carry forward. It's been a collective job where all of the individuals who've had stories to tell, who wanted to hear about this trail, who wanted to see it come into being and manifest, have participated. So it's been individuals, but we worked together collaboratively. We've listened to some hard truth, heard some stories that we might not have known about before, which was very enlightening. And we were willing to sit there and listen to the hard truth, but be willing to embrace it and make the changes that were necessary. And that's become, it's happened due to the help of JMI and James Warren. They've done remarkable work with surveying the community to get data, listening to everyone, and realizing that everyone needs to be in a safe space and creating that safe space so those folks could be heard. James Warren, let's see if I can pull up what I was told to say about you. Mr. James Warren is Vice President of Brand Strategy at JMI and founder of Share More Stories. He and the team at JMI have worked on this initiative for the better part of this year and are excited to reach this milestone with the Williamsburg community, and that's a mouthful. As I was told by another person sitting here, the reparations comes in many forms. So you shouldn't tell me stuff because I'll use it. I just won't call the name. And they do come in many forms. And we realize some things are impossible, but I heard when someone say when you remove the impossible, then all that's remaining is what's possible. And I hope that collectively we can take into consideration everything that the committee and Mr. Warren and JMI have made happen and brought to the forefront to this day. So thank you. The next person you'll hear is Mr. James Warren.
Welcome, Mr. Warren.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. Very grateful for the opportunity to share with you the work we've done with the community on behalf of the advisory committee and the members of this wonderful and wonderfully diverse community called Williamsburg. What I wanted to do is first just kind of give you a little bit of background on the process, how we got to where we are today, which is a milestone represented by the draft narrative, as we like to refer to it, which is an attempt to really bring together a lot of perspective, stories, from things that we consider historical fact, quote unquote, as well as voices from the community whose voices haven't always been heard or included when we decide what we want to tell about a place or a series of events. And so we do that in general. We start by saying, well, whose voices and stories need to be told and where do they come from? And that's what the community and the advisory committee really helped us understand. And so we started collecting those stories and organizing those stories, listening to members of the community, being guided by and listening to members of the advisory committee, and conducting our research, the secondary sources that were available. We found great participation and willingness to support this work from a number of organizations and institutions in and around the Williamsburg Committee. They showed up to community input meetings. They pointed us to additional resources. They pointed us to people whose stories needed to be captured and told and heard, and we did just that. What came out of that was what we call a narrative, which is a way of saying, how do we want to organize all of these things we've heard? And sometimes that's a choice. It's a choice we don't take lightly. It's a choice we feel necessary to be informed by the principles and the intention behind this great work, which is really to not just lift up the story of the African American experience in and around Williamsburg, but ultimately to connect that history and that story to the broader story we tell about Williamsburg, so that at the end of this, there is a fuller, more complete narrative of what Williamsburg is and the role it plays in the American experience. And so we do that by really focusing on this, what we call authentic exploration of the community stories. And some of those stories, as you've already heard hinted at, are painful. Sometimes they're hard to hear, hard to juxtapose with other stories. But as we have found in our work in general, this is often the case. When you ask people to tell you their stories, you don't get to pick and choose how they feel about their experiences, which stories they want to tell you. The job becomes bringing all of those stories together, weaving them together in a way that is not only sort of coherent from a communication standpoint, but really one that honors the individual voices that are represented in that story, past and present, and ultimately future. The other thing that we had to endeavor to do was to really find the right balance and tone. And so when you are telling stories that are both historical in nature and also present in terms of culture, you have to find ways to say, how do we honor what we call the pain of the experience, but also the triumph and even the joy that is found in the African American experience. That is a truth that we have found across different projects and communities. It was deeply true here in Williamsburg, and I would say even the intensity of those emotions was particularly strong in the stories we heard. And you saw that in how the community conversations proceeded. We went from our very first one, where people wanted to know who we were and why we were here, to the second one, where folks had lots to say and wanted to know more about the personal stories we had heard and wanted to make sure we were reaching out to more and more folks in the community, to the third one, where people were able to say, wow, you know, you've really listened. You've looked in a lot of different places, but there's still a few more places you need to look and a few more people you need to talk to and a few more stories we want you to gather. And so that kind of became the work and the cadence, connecting with the community, sharing the progress, and hearing from them where else did we need to go and who else did we need to listen to. And so that feedback process, that loop, if you will, really was the cadence of the work, as I mentioned. And what we did throughout the process is we'd gather that information, we'd start outlining it, pulling it into a narrative format, and started to publish, if you will, or share is a better word, the first draft of that, which we did several weeks ago for public comment and feedback. And as you all know, that process is going to invite people to not only share their feedback on the narrative, but it's sort of like one final call for that phase to say, is there anything else we're missing? Are there any other stories that you think are necessary? And we shared what we learned from that feedback here in our most recent community input meeting. And one of the things that I was particularly grateful to hear and pleased to hear on behalf of the team and the committee was members of the community who were really vocal throughout the process to make sure that their stories would be heard, that their experiences would be incorporated. We're saying things like, I printed it off and I took it to the elders and I read it to them. And they said, this is really good. This is our story. I heard from others who wrote us and emailed us to say, I've read through it. This is excellent work. And I say that not to compliment ourselves. I say that to tell you that we have taken this work quite seriously to make sure that we are weaving those stories together, sharing on behalf of the African American community here in and around Williamsburg, and doing this work the honor and justice it deserves. And so in that final stage of work, what we found ourselves doing was sort of just, you know, literally and figuratively dotting the I's and crossing the T's, going back through, making sure that we wove in all of the outstanding remaining feedback. We worked closely with the committee to share that, ask questions, get additional clarifications where we needed to, and really just go through that final revision process. We also wanted to make sure that in the final draft, all of the historical sources were appropriately cited and referenced, because this is not just a point-in-time exercise. This is also a contribution to the history, to the narrative, to say, hey, for future kids, students, historians, and the like, to be able to say not only what is the story, but where did it come from? And so we wanted to make sure we were making it as complete as possible for this point in time. I want to share with you, and I'll read it for a moment, and then I'll just remark briefly before I open it up for questions. As you probably know by now, you've seen the full narrative, you recognize hopefully some of this messaging, but for those who are here, I'll just read this briefly. The African American experience in Williamsburg is one of enduring resiliency and soul-fed joy, rooted in faith, achievement, and a rich cultural heritage. Three key themes, say that 3 times real fast, underpinning that experience continually rose to the surface through research, conversations, and the community meetings right here in this room. The first was strength derived from faith. The second was power gained by education. And the third was resilience built from community. The histories and the stories contained in the Williamsburg narrative are organized within these themes and further brought to life with first-person reflections, recollections, and reminiscences from the Williamsburg community, the African American community. They were collected from current and former residents and or descendants through our initiative with Share More Stories, collecting those stories, preserving those voices from the community. The narrative also includes content that won't necessarily have a physical marker on the African American Heritage Trail, but by acknowledging people, places, and events that contributed to the region's history, the city of Williamsburg is helping to ensure that future generations learn the truth about our shared past. Our shared past is the key phrase there. And so there's a couple of things I just wanted to point out. When we asked the community to participate and share their own stories and recollections, and we've done this in lots of different projects, we knew that there were sensitivities in sharing that information, that people would have to navigate the trust barrier to be willing to share, and we heard people say things like that. How do I know this is trusted? What will you do with my story? But what we saw happen was gradually, the more people shared and participated, they told their neighbors, they told their friends, they told their families. And by the end, we had well over 50, if not 60, individual personal stories submitted by members of the community, in addition to all of the historical stories that we were able to gather. And those personal stories are what you see sort of peppered throughout the narrative, kind of bringing it to life, making it more personal, making it more approachable for everyday people today to say, yes, I see myself in this story. I see my family's experience in this story. And then the other point I wanted to comment on is this idea of including places and events that don't necessarily have a physical marker on the trail. We heard a lot about that from the community. When you say we're going to build a trail, 2 things happen. You get excited and then you say, I want this, and this on the trail. And we had to navigate that. I'm sure you all had to navigate that. And the way we did that was by saying the trail itself is an expression of this bigger narrative. The narrative is the story, and all of your stories are part of it. And you can expand this trail in the future, you can add to it digitally, you can do lots of things that help people find a specific place or event or person that they want to know about. But if we pull all those stories together and you let people see themselves in it, that's the work, and that's what we were able to accomplish. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and again, on behalf of JMI and Share More Stories and the committee and the community, very grateful that we were able to support you in this work. Thank you for entrusting your stories to us and introducing us to your stories and your families and your communities so we could bring your stories into the fuller narrative of the city of Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Warren, thank you, and thank you to all those served on the committee to get us to this point. When Ms. Kennedy was speaking, she mentioned that she was honored to be in the position where we are today and to be able to talk about it. But everybody knows I'm not a great orator, and if I could really express how I feel, it would be genius. But I am so proud and honored to be part of a council that wants this story of Williamsburg, which is so steeped in history, to be more factual, to tell the whole story. And so where we are in this place of time today is just so important, and I think we are making a significant difference in doing this. And so thank you again for all your hard work and putting efforts to this, putting a story to this, putting a face and name to this, because we are better for it. So thank you for that, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and I would obviously like to add my thanks as well, and having attended several of the meetings, community input meetings, you could sense that feeling, as you mentioned, from the first meeting through the progress till the last meeting when the narrative was presented of those, some doubts about how the story would be told. And that's understandable. But to see it progress to the last meeting when the narrative was presented and how it seemed accepted by everyone who participated in it and told their stories, it was amazing. I truly believe that Mr. Warren and his associates were the right people. I don't know him very well, but as those meetings progressed, you could also see their passion for doing this type of work, as well as the passion of the committee and everyone that told their stories. So I say as well, I'm proud to be a part of a council that has pushed this forward. And as I've often said with other projects, when you start the project, saying you're going to do it is the easy work. Y'all have done the hard work of bringing it to where it is today. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to keep with the thanks going and really express my appreciation. And as I was reading over the narrative materials and listening, and all I can think of is just like, my goodness, like how privileged am I to be here at this time? This is a gift. And I really feel in a lot of ways my job here is just to get out of the way, because this is really about, what allowing space that is here and has always been here, and have these stories be elevated, and the true importance of that can't be overstated. And there's a few things that, as we were listening, and that really resonated with me, and I think echoing what Ms. Kennedy said, this and affirming this isn't an end. This is part of a process and part of a journey, and so there's no end point here. This is a step, and we have to keep going, and we have to keep moving, and we have to keep progressing, and it's just a real moment here that we can stop and say, wow, like this is a process, and how wonderful it is that we are on this journey all together. And also something that was said about future generations learning the truth about our shared past, and not only future generations but current. Here we are now, and how much better we are as a community, that not only in the future will those of us who are here and those of us who come after us learn, but those of us who are here now can learn and move forward, knowing and understanding more than we have in the past. So it's exciting to me to think about, well, what can we do now that we're here, and what can we do next, and what is possible, and removing that and thinking about, like, why can't we do that? Why not? And so it's really exciting. And thank you so much. Thank everyone so much again. I'm just really proud of this moment, and let's keep going.
So I will also say my thanks. I think that when this idea first came to council and was added to our GIO, we had no idea how the process would unfold. And I think we didn't know the depth of the stories. And I guess it was last summer I was in San Francisco on a William and Mary trip, and they had different tours that we could take. And so I took the African American tour that they had in San Francisco, just to see as a comparison and what I might be able to learn to bring back to Williamsburg. And I was very disappointed, because all it was there was a plaque on a wall, or there was a sign where something once stood, but there were no stories to tell what the history had been, who the people were involved. And I think that's what I like best about this, is that it has so much depth to the individuals, and it also allows for more to be added. And in reading the narrative, I found it very easy to read. I read the first page and I wanted to go on to the next one. I liked the way that it was formatted. I liked the intersection of the different quotes that were included. I like the different categories and how they were spelled out. And so to me, if it's something that, people, because so many times now we get inundated with a lot of text. And it's like, you sort of skip to the highlights. But this was something where I wanted to read every word and go to the next page. So I applaud you and whoever else was involved in putting it together so that people could find it as a page turner, so to speak. I also like the use of the word joy. I don't, there's certain words that we don't use a lot, and I think joy just sort of captures a great emotion. And so I was pleased to see that. So thank you, and thanks to everyone who had a part in it.
Yeah, and I echo just the notes of joyful thanks, Mr. Warren, the JMI team, and then certainly our members of the committee who've seen the Heritage Trail from conception pre-2020 to actually over the last 4 years of, I'm sure, a little bit of mixed in doubt of, will this really happen? What's the ultimate form that it'll take? Now getting to see it through. So thank you all so much for getting to see this actually soon enough implemented into the ground. I think that's one of the most exciting parts for me is, as Councilman Ramsey mentioned, it's not just one in and of itself monument or one plaque that we're putting somewhere. It's a lot of stories that maybe have been known, a lot that are new as well, but that we're activating and tying in together. I mean, now the Cook Building and the Sankofa Seed Sculpture and the First Baptist Church, all of these and more, someone who's new to Williamsburg or who's lived here, their family for generations will get to see at one time. And I think there's something just extremely poetic in that. So it leaves me really excited. I was glad to hear too, Ms. Canaday, of the agreement and support of, as you said, the elders, because I know in having been on council, it's hard to get elders to agree about anything, really. So it's nice that there is, after a half-decade almost effort for this Heritage Trail, a real enjoyment of what it's going to look like and maybe a vision of one day I'll soon enough be able to walk that. And then on a personal note too, I was just thinking about what feels like yesterday for me, but it really isn't. Summer of 2020, and one of my very first votes on council was one vote in a meeting that took about 3 hours. And it was people who were coming up to talk about how we should and shouldn't activate our public spaces in what we're memorializing. There was an obelisk in Bicentennial Park, and that obelisk was to the Confederate Sons of Williamsburg. And there were people for hours coming in front of us saying, I don't feel like this is a park that I'm comfortable walking around. I wouldn't want to maybe take my family here. It doesn't feel like it's for me. And just the fact that this council has realized that we want to make sure Williamsburg is a place where if you're living here, if you're visiting here, you can feel like there are spaces for you 4 years later, not only seeing those stories, but elevating them, I think is a really poetic thing to get to do. So I'm extremely excited to get to see the Heritage Trail where it is today, federally funded, supported by the community, supported by council and the city and professionals who do this work too. So thank you all so much for all the time and the treasure and talent that's gone into this. Extremely appreciative of it and excited to support it on Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all that came today as well, and all your work. Okay, takes us now to council communications. Does anybody have anything you want to share? Okay, takes us now to open forum, which is again an opportunity for anybody to come forward and address council. Seeing no mad rush to the podium, we'll move on. I believe we have a item for closed session, Mr. Vice Mayor.
We do. I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one legal matter pursuant to subparagraph 7 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members, consultants, or attorneys pertaining to actual or probable litigation concerning a contract. One legal matter per subparagraph 8 for the purpose of consultation on specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel regarding appointments, and the discussion of the award of public contract involving the expenditure of public funds where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body per subparagraph 29.
Second.
Okay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Okay, we will return and go back into open session when we return. So thank you. Open session.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Second?
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Dusty?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.